I almost didn't make the Sunday service. After my match in Holland, I got to the airport in Amsterdam, along with my pal Spam, who had come along for the ride, along with another of my friends, Will, who wasn't at the airport at this time, as he had decided to stay on and get himself a hooker and some weed. Each to their own, I guess. Anyway, Spam and I checked in our bags and we watched them sail away on the conveyor belt, thinking we'd be on our plane and back to the UK within a couple of hours max. Sadly, this was not the case. We got upstairs in the airport and put the remainder of our money that we had left together, then figured out that we could afford 3 beers between us. So off we went to the bar and got ourselves 2 beers to help see us on our way. We quickly supped up our beers, then went to look on the screens to see which gate we were boarding from. Only, to our absolute horror, it seemed we would not be boarding at all, at least not on this night, as all the flights had been cancelled due to a low fog. Please note, we were tired, we were hungover, I was beaten up from a hard-hitting wrestling match with a tough Dutchman, and, this is probably the worst bit, due to Amsterdam and its culture draining the money from our wallets, we could now only afford 1 beer between us. 1 fucking beer. You read that right. We decided to take a walk. We walked around the airport, which wasn't very big, to be honest with you. Upon wandering around with the airport, we discovered on display in the middle of one of the retail sections this red Ducati sports motorcycle. Now, this was a cool bike. We had a good look at it and pretty much studied every nut and bolt on the thing. We studied the clock, the paintwork, the exhaust system, the throttle, the mirrors, etc. We must have spent a good half hour looking at this bike. Then, when we were done, we continued to wander around the airport. We didn't have any money and our bags had been checked in, so we went to see what the status of our bags was, as the flight was cancelled. So we gathered they weren't on the plane. The service we got now was absolute shite. No one could tell us where our bags were. We couldn't get any answers. I knew that in my bag I had the Celtic Wrestling Championship belt, which I was feeling a little bit uneasy about, and which I was due to defend against your old school hero, Steve Corino, the day after tomorrow. So we went to the EasyJet information desk, and all they could tell us was that the flight was cancelled. We asked if our bags were on the plane, to which the lady replied, "No plane." What the fuck, like? No plane? What does that even mean? Did she mean that the flight had been cancelled? Did she mean that no plane had got there and our bags were still in between that bit that all the bags passed through and hung out at, on the way to being loaded up onto the aeroplane? What was the deal? Anyway, she simply couldn't tell us. Nobody could. What a shower of shit. We continued to wander around the airport. We passed the red Ducati again and had another little look at it, though it wasn't half as interesting this time round, having already examined every nut and bolt in our previous wander. We walked on. We got to the bar, and knowing that we only had enough money for 1 beer between us, we chipped it together, deciding it was now time to cash in, pass a little time, and share that beer. So, in what seemed to be no slower than a heartbeat, we had consumed our 1 beer, and we were now literally in airport poverty. We continued to walk around, studying every part of the airport, which, by the way, wasn't very exciting. We had now been walking around in circles for what seemed to be an eternity. Several hours had passed by, and no one was telling us anything. As we passed what had now become that fucking red Ducati for the 100th time, we were starting to lose the plot. However, it was then that I discovered an area that I had not yet inhabited. There was this glass screen with a doorway in it, and beyond the screen I could see conveyor belts. At the end of these conveyor belts, I could make out what looked to be 2 bags. I said to Spam, with a hint of sudden hope in my voice, "I'm sure there are our bags down there," as we rushed off to the area. Upon getting there, we were indeed met with our bags. Then, to our absolute shock, 2 security guards came over to us, really laying the law down. The one arsehole was shouting his head off at us, yelling, "Why do you leave your bags here? Why do you leave your bags here?" To which we tried to explain the situation. Sadly for us, The more we tried to explain, the more he continued to shout and get louder. Why ask a question if when we attempt to answer, you just stamp your authority? This guy was an absolute cock. Spam then started getting a bit pissed off with him. So now I had the task of trying to keep both him and this idiot security guard cool. I could see that the guard was reaching near his waist, and I remember thinking, whoa, I've got to defend the Celtic wrestling title against Steve Corino on Sunday. I really don't want to get shot. Anyway, thankfully, after much explaining, guard number 2 seemed to have a bit more personal skills. He actually listened to what we had to say. He then, in his Dutch tongue, explained to his colleague what the situation was, and that we hadn't dumped our bags there. They were dumped there by whoever took them into their possession when we checked them in, as soon as we got to the airport. Anyway, as soon as, we'll call him decent guard, explained the situation to, we'll call him arsehole guard, he seemed to relax, lowered his voice, and in a mild-mannered tone simply said, okay, before they both walked off. Spam was absolutely seething. It was worth it though, as A, it was highly amusing, B, we were reunited with our bags, and C, this situation had passed a little more time. It was now 5 a.m. in the morning, so Spam and I decided to park ourselves under some seats somewhere and try to get some sleep. Spam dropped off pretty much straight away, and he was snoring louder than a wildebeest. That did me no favours whatsoever. Me, being the type of sleeper who wakes up to the footsteps of a cat walking up the driveway, I wasn't dropping off in any hurry. I managed to make myself some earplugs or some tissue paper from my bag, and I shoved them deep into my yuggles. Time must have now got to around 5:45 a.m, and finally I could feel my body relaxing and my mind finally fucking off to Noddyland. Just as I dropped off, just as the Z's were floating from my unconscious body, I felt something kicking my arm. Then I heard a familiar voice, one that I was not too pleased to hear. The voice said to me, "Time to wake up, it's 6 o'clock. I opened my eyes, absolutely fucking fuming, as I had been wandering around an airport all night with no money, no food, no sleep. Then, when I finally did drop off to sleep, this idiot woke me up. There he was, in all his fucking glory. There he stood, arsehole guard. Knowing if I stuck one on him, I would likely get shot, I simply sat up, as did everyone else he was going around waking up with the reason of it being 6 o'clock. What sort of rule is that? You're not allowed to sleep past 6 a.m? Even if you didn't get to sleep till 6 a.m? I was fucking livid. We'd ended up spending probably another 8 hours in the airport, during which time we continued doing laps, seeing the same old faces and that godforsaken red Ducati time and time again, which we were now pig sick of seeing. We still had no money, we had no food, we had no water. EasyJet didn't give us so much as a drinks voucher because it was due to natural causes and no negligence on their part. Basically, we were screwed and we couldn't wait to get home. Thankfully, our flight was now listed on the screen. I remember thinking to myself, there is a God, as I could see our flight time now, only 24 hours late, mind. Finally, it was time for the flight. We'd literally spent 24 hours wandering around an airport. We were starving, we were thirsty, we were tired, we were irritable. We gathered in a massive queue, like herding sheep. We could see the plane in the near distance. The people in front of us were boarding, and it was soon to be our turn. Herding like sheep in the queue, getting closer and closer, edging closer and closer to the front. Just as we were nearing the front of the queue, I felt a tap on my shoulder. I turned around, and in my absolute disbelief, I could see my mate Will, who had been living the high life for the last 24 hours, shagging prostitutes, smoking weed, looking all fresh-faced. Not only that, but he had completely cheated the queue and joined us at the front. He said, and I'll never forget these words, "Amsterdam just wasn't the same without Cayman and Spam." We just could not believe it, and we wanted to batter him. The ordeal that we had gone through over the last 24 hours, getting delayed, losing our bags, running out of money, arguing with security, constantly groundhogging it around that red fucking Ducati, all while he was getting his end away, getting high, then sleeping in a hotel bed. Immediately, Spam and I sent Will to the back of the queue and we disgraced him for the whole of the flight home.